to account. Last Friday, Rowley accused the opposition of making mischief and lying when we spoke of a proposed US $100 million pipeline from the Dragon Field in Venezuela to the Hibiscus platform off the coast of Trinidad. Rowley boasted that he knew the facts and that the media should ask the opposition where we got that figure from. Well, let me say this. When the opposition comes to the population, we don't make up emails. We don't make up lies. You want to know where we got that $100 million from? Well, here's the answer. We got it from Stuart Young. In the Trinidad Express dated March 15, 2017, 7 years ago, the headline, Shell to build 17-kilometer pipeline from Dragon to Hibiscus. The article refers to a press conference held in Caracas, which included Stuart Young, Rowley's Minister of Energy. And I want to quote the article. It says, and I quote, Venezuela's state-owned oil and gas company's president, Eulogio Del Pino, said at the press conference, he said, and I quote, "We've signed an agreement to supply gas to Trinidad through the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago and Shell, and also to build a gas pipeline between Venezuela and Trinidad." The article continues, Jerry Brooks signed on behalf of the NGC, while De Pino signed on behalf of PDVSA, and Port of Spain-based Luis Prado signed on behalf of Shell. Listen to this carefully. Young signed on behalf of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The agreements, and I'm continuing the quotation, the agreements were not shared with the media. However, Young was quoted in one of the Venezuelan government's statements as saying the development of the project could entail an investment of more than $100 million. I want to repeat that. Young was quoted in one of the Venezuelan government's statements as saying the development of the project would entail an investment of more than US $100 million. The article continued, the agreements cover the construction, operation, and maintenance of a gas pipeline from Dragon Field, located in the northeast of the Paria Peninsula, to Trinidad's Hibiscus platform. So who is the liar now, Dr. Rowley? We got it from the horse's mouth, the Minister of Energy. And this information has been in the public domain, uncontested by Rowley, Young, or anyone else for the last 7 years. And the Prime Minister knows this, ladies and gentlemen. On Friday, he boasted that he was involved in this deal since conception. So who is making mischief now, Dr. Rowley? The Prime Minister wants to play big and bad, like a bully, and try to intimidate this country into silence. But we are not afraid. We are not afraid of him and his lies, no matter how loudly he shouts. And no matter how loudly he shouts, we will shout the truth louder as he shouts his lies. I want the media to ask Dr. Rowley, since he knew the truth, it's in the public domain for the last 7 years, why lie about it? It is really irritating to have to come to deal with the repeated lies flowing from the mouths of ministers of government like a river. It is also worth noting, ladies and gentlemen, that this article that I referenced earlier also tells us that the Express was forced to resort to official Venezuelan government statements because the same PNM ministers who are talking freely in Venezuela do not believe that the people of Trinidad and Tobago have a right to know. Imagine the Venezuelan authorities were issuing open statements with details, but here in Trinidad and Tobago, everything is a secret. Young and Rowley believe that citizens have no right to know about agreements they signed which bind us and future generations for decades. So I want to ask the media, to ask Rowley, why the secrecy? What is there to hide? Because if he could lie about little things, he would lie about big things. I remember one time when Dr. Rowley came back from yet another foreign excursion and boasted to this country that he received a telephone call from the Gates Foundation promising significant funding for this country. Well, as usual, that was not true. So when Rowley boasts that he has an agreement with the United States, that means that the sanctions placed on doing business with Venezuela no longer will apply to this country, but will apply to the rest of the world. Bring the proof. We do not trust this government. And it is not just the opposition that is concerned, ladies and gentlemen. 2 weeks ago, all of the independent senators voted with the opposition, calling on the government to account, to provide transparency about this project, and still the government has refused. What are they hiding? Do you remember the scandal, ladies and gentlemen? Another secret deal by this government, which was busted wide open when the media revealed the excessive tax concessions that were being offered under the guise of confidentiality. You cannot trust this government. Why is it that every single thing to do with this dragon gas deal is secret in Trinidad and Tobago, but everything is open in Venezuela? My colleague will deal with some of those issues in a few minutes. On Friday, too, Dr. Rowley announced that international criminals had taken a liking to Trinidad and Tobago, and that he was working with the FBI and the CIA to ensure that this bad situation does not get worse. But how did we get to this point, where we cannot attract foreign investment in Trinidad and Tobago? We cannot attract foreign countries to come, foreign businesses to come to invest in Trinidad and Tobago, but somehow we have become an attractive destination for international crime syndicates. It is like a sick and twisted version of foreign direct investment. It is untenable, ladies and gentlemen, that the only jobs being created in this country is by the gangs who are making bandits and murderers of our young people. The only diversification taking place is where criminals are now branching off into financial and technological crimes. Almost 9 years have passed under this PNM regime, and we are seeing the rise of one new industry in Trinidad and Tobago: the criminal industry, the crime sector. Crime is certainly, crime is clearly, crime is the only industry that is flourishing in Trinidad and Tobago right now. And it is because of the destructive actions of this Prime Minister, this Minister of Finance, and this government, which have created an environment where almost all other sectors, including the local business sector, the criminal justice sector, education, health, social services, local government, agriculture, etc., have all been disseminated to the point of critical failure. These are the very conditions that drive away foreign investors. These are the very conditions that drive away legitimate people wanting to do business in Trinidad and Tobago, but are attractive enough to international crime syndicates to encourage them to want to set up shop in our communities. I am going to say this again. This is not a political issue, because I cannot believe, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot imagine that PNM supporters of other political parties and non-political citizens are happy with the current state of affairs in our country after 8.5 years of PNM rule. Under the Rowley government, ladies and gentlemen, every arm of the protective services and the administration of justice has been compromised by lack of resources, lack of funding to increase staff, to purchase equipment, to undertake investigations, and to ensure successful prosecution of criminals. Since 2017, the Prime Minister received the TTPS manpower audit report, which pointed out to significant and urgent staff and equipment shortages in the police service. Did the government act? No. For the last 7 years, Rowley and his gang has not taken a single step towards fixing the shortages in the police services, and increasing the number of police officers, and increasing the number of vehicles, and increasing the capacity and capability of the police service to do their jobs. Instead, they have undermined the police service by under-resourcing it for the last 7 and 8 years since this manpower audit, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, it was only recently in the budget for the fiscal year 2024, some 7 years after the manpower audit was completed, that funds were finally allocated for mass recruitment drives to finally to bring the TTPS up to strength. But we all know that the PNM has a habit, the Minister of Finance has a habit of promising but not releasing funds. So let's see, ladies and gentlemen, if the TTPS will actually receive the funding that was allocated to it. Let's see if the number of persons required, the 22% shortage of labor in the police service, let's see if that will actually be resolved in 2024, as promised by the Minister of National Security, the Prime Minister, and the Minister of Finance. But importantly, ladies and gentlemen, if you had the manpower audit since 2017, why wait for 7 years? The government knew how urgently the TTPS needed resources to cope with the rising crime wave. So why delay? And why did the Prime Minister intentionally spark a constitutional crisis to get rid of the most successful Commissioner of Police that we have ever had? I will deal with that some more just now. Gary was getting the job done. He was fearless about taking the fight to criminals. People in this country felt safer with Gary at the helm. So why did the Prime Minister go through such extraordinary lengths to have him removed? Is it really because the Prime Minister's feelings were hurt because he did not like how the Commissioner spoke to him? Seriously? Is that why we now have a Commissioner of Police with no security of tenure and whose contract extension is totally dependent on the whim and fancy of the Prime Minister and his cabinet? For almost 9 years now, the administration of justice has fallen victim to a PNM government whose policies and actions have facilitated, have caused the worst crime tsunami this country has ever seen. Since this Rowley government has been in office, over 85,000 persons have been direct victims of crime, either via robberies, rapes, assault, battery, home invasions, or murdered. Crime has touched the lives of every man, woman, and child in our beloved nation. Every single one of you listening today, regardless of your age, gender, financial status, geographic location, or which political party you support, every single one of you today knows a friend or a relative who has been a victim of crime in Trinidad and Tobago, if you have not been a victim yourself. And the numbers are increasing every day. Every one of these incidents are traumatic, leaving psychological and emotional scars on their victims that last forever. Yesterday, I met with the members of a family in my community who were the recent victims of a home invasion. What was once a place of safety, of solace, a place of memories of prayer and family, their home, is now a place filled with memories of abuse, bloodshed, fear, and trauma. Their parents are unable to sleep, fearful that every sound means that someone is coming to brutalize, rape, or kill their children, their family. The children themselves are traumatized and silent, unable to sleep, petrified because of their horrific experiences. Ladies and gentlemen, only a victim of crime and their families know and feel the true pain and trauma that they have to experience. And what is worse is that this family believes that the criminals that shattered their lives will never be caught and will continue to destroy the lives of others. And God forbid, may even return to finish the job. And unfortunately, they are right. The evidence shows that the killers of 9 out of every 10 persons murdered, those killers get away scot-free. Let that sink in. On average, someone in this country is slaughtered every 16 hours. And as atrocious as that is, there's even worse news. The average detection rate over the last 8.5 years is about 12%. What does that mean? It means that the discovery of a crime has been committed, the suspect has been identified, and sufficient evidence has been collected to indict a suspect before the court. A 12% detection rate over the last 8.5 years means that out of every 100 persons who are killed, only 12 are granted justice. The families of the other 88 are left without hope to face a broken system caused by this clueless and heartless PNM government. Ladies and gentlemen, since Rowley has been Prime Minister and head of the National Security Council, there have been approximately 4,085 murders in Trinidad and Tobago, and the numbers keep going up. Of those 4,085 murders, 475 have been detected. That is, the suspect has been identified and brought before the court. That means that the number of murders that have not been solved under this Rowley government is 3,610. Put another way, ladies and gentlemen, over 3,610 murderers are walking the nation's roads every day. Even if you consider the possibility of multiple homicides by the same offender, the chance of a murderer being held and brought to court for murder is very, very slim. Murderers are 9 times more likely to escape being brought to justice than they are likely to be held, charged, and successfully prosecuted. And even that, as bad as it is not the worst part. The conviction rate, that is the rate at which persons get convicted and go to prison for their crime, the conviction rate is also about 12%, meaning that of the 475 alleged murderers that are brought to court, only 59 are actually convicted. And if the numbers sound confusing, remember this conclusion, backed by the facts that I just put in the public domain, backed by the fact that it already exists if you look at the police statistical information. Of the 4,085 murders since Rowley and his gang have been in government, only 59 gets jailed for their crime. 99% of murders are getting away. 99% of murderers are getting away because of this government's deliberate policy decisions and because of the underfunding of the arms of justice. Ladies and gentlemen, today, like you, I woke up to this headline. Earlier, not the worst. Earlier, not the worst. Based on some statistics that a very enterprising individual seemed to put together with a particular purpose. According to this newspaper article, the commissioner is doing well because she has a detection rate of 14%. So by their maths, the commissioner is doing well because 86% of the murders in this country have not been solved over the last year, and that is something they want you to celebrate. That is failure. It means that of the 576 odd murders over the last year, 495 of them, that's 88%, remain unsolved. How does that help Andrea Lallan, 13-year-old, murdered after she identified her rapist? How does that help 9-year-old Jamal Modest, killed in a senseless violence just a few minutes from here? He wanted to go up to be a soldier to fight against crime. So when Erla and the Prime Minister boast of a 14% detection rate as something to crow about, what about the families of the 495 victims from 2023 alone who do not have closure because their murderers have got away scot-free? And where are these murderers? They are sitting next to you in the maxi taxis. They are in the market looking for their next victim. They are buying doubles by the corner. They are buying flour in the grocery next to you. They are walking the streets, whining for carnival, enjoying their freedoms because they know that they will not be caught. This is Trinidad and Tobago under Hines, Rowley, and Imbert, ladies and gentlemen. And the figures for rape, home invasions, robberies, etc. are just as bad. Criminals are being allowed to get away scot-free under this government, and it should not be so. There is an absolute absence of political will by this Rowley crew to solve this crime crisis. As a matter of fact, under this PNM, and thanks to this government, the scales of justice are heavily tilted in favor of the criminals. The police service responsible for investigating and arresting criminals is short-staffed by 22%. And they don't have adequate vehicles and critical equipment to do their jobs. A few days ago, I was told about a police station operating with one vehicle to cover hundreds of square kilometers, and that vehicle has to work 24/7, 365. Night and day, every single day of the year. And if it breaks down, then the police are unable to respond to a single report. And while they're responding to one report, they cannot respond to any other report. So criminal investigation arm, that criminal investigation of the police service is suffering because of the lack of government support, and they are unable to do their job. Recently, the country was told that the office of the DPP was short-staffed by over 50%. And instead of doing something about it, do you know what Dr. Rowley's response was? He blamed the DPP. So the agency responsible for catching the criminals, for investigation and catching the criminals, as the police service, is underfunded. The agency responsible for prosecuting the criminals, that is also underfunded. And the judiciary is equally underfunded, affected by the shortages throughout the system. Obviously, this will severely limit their ability to do the job. But the government wants you to focus on everybody else. Their inability to do their job, ladies and gentlemen, is because of the failure of the government to fund them, to provide the resources needed to treat with this crime. This government simply is not serious about dealing with crime. It lacks the political will. Even the Coast Guard is under-resourced, short-staffed and without adequate working vessels and personnel to patrol our borders. If you go down to Stobbles Bay today, you will see a virtual graveyard of Coast Guard boats rotting away while our coastlines are open to criminals. Under this PNM government, tens of thousands of illegal immigrants enter this country. Illegal guns, drugs, banned animals, birds, human trafficking is being facilitated by this government's under-resourcing of the Coast Guard and the rest of the operations of the protective services. I maintain, ladies and gentlemen, that this is not about the lack of money. This is not because of that. Rather, it is because of the government's tendency to facilitate crime and even encourage criminal activity by the policies they have been openly adopting. This government, this PNM, has spent over $450 billion to date, but it is open season for criminals against citizens of this country. It is not about money. It's the absence of political will. Ask yourself why, ladies and gentlemen. Why does this government lack the political will to tackle crime front on? Why is it that they refuse to take actions against criminals? Businesses are also suffering a double whammy. As citizens, they have the same fear as all of us, as all citizens, but their status as business owners make them a direct target for criminals. Today's bandits are well researched, operating in broad daylight in large numbers and with sophisticated weapons and precision coordination. They are willing to kill to make their point, to kidnap and to brutalize in order to extract money from business owners. The recent home invasion in which businessman Richard Ramkissoon was beaten and killed has shown that even with guard dogs, high fences, burglar-proofing and steel doors, security systems, and taking every possible precaution available, nobody is safe in this PNM-run country. Whether you're a businessman, an average citizen, a lawyer, a doctor, a priest, a policeman, a prison officer, a police officer, a teacher, you are not safe in your homes, on the streets, in your business place, on the nation's roads, on churches, in schools, in temples. You are not safe if you are alone or if you are in a small or large group. But you know, citizens need to be reminded that the crime response in this country is managed by three players. It's not just one, it's three players. The Commissioner of Police, the Minister of National Security, and the Prime Minister, who is the head of the National Security Council that presides over all arms of the protective services. On Friday last, when asked to speak about the level of crime, Rowley picked up his notes and told our blood-soaked country, told our petrified citizens, that he had provided enough information for the day, telling them, come back Tuesday. This is a man who, after 8.5 years in office and $450 billion, is still talking about developing an anti-crime plan. We in the opposition have provided informed policy recommendations based on our own research and experience, which when implemented during the period 2010 to 2015, caused a reduction in crime, ladies and gentlemen. We have repeatedly reached out to this government, hoping for a serious, united, bipartisan approach to dealing with this national crisis. But Rowley and his gang continue to refuse to meet, continue to talk only And while they sit in their ivory towers with armed security protecting them and their families, citizens are left at the mercy of criminals. On Friday again, the Prime Minister refused to provide any answers to a frustrated citizenry about the most critical issue facing this country, crime, preferring to push it down to another day. The citizens, this country, has had enough talk. Rowley has refused to act, preferring to play petty politics and blame games with the lives of citizens. So while he is off playing golf or traveling the world at taxpayers' expense, these same taxpayers suffer at the mercy of a growing criminal class that have absolutely no fear of the police, prison, or justice. It is obvious to all, ladies and gentlemen, that this Commissioner of Police has failed in her job. Confidence in the police service is at an all-time low and continues to fall. But who is to blame? Is it the Commissioner? She didn't put herself there. Is it the Police Complaints Authority that interviewed and ranked her as the highest qualified and the best choice for the job? Or is it the fault of the P&M cabinet that recommended her? Is it the bungling Minister of National Security who has repeatedly divested himself of responsibility for securing the population but continues to benefit from a hefty salary for the job that he is not doing? Do you know that taxpayers have paid Hines $2.2 million in salaries and allowances over the last 34 months since he has been made Minister of National Security? He has presided also over the expenditure of over $24 billion, making him the most expensive failure of a line minister. And what is even more tenable is that his incompetence is no secret. When asked on Friday about his conspicuous absence from the delegation which visited the United States and met with high-level security officers and officials in Washington, the Prime Minister's dismissive response was that Hines was tied up to his eyeballs at home. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to untie him. Nobody believes that Hines can make any dent in crime. He has been the most expensive and chronic failure, and this country continues to pay the price in money and in blood. Regardless of what Rowley says, I believe, and the country believes, that Hines is a national embarrassment and would have been an international embarrassment if he had accompanied the Prime Minister to Washington. But Rowley's support for Hines, despite his failure, has been a hallmark of the government's anti-crime policies. His antics are not funny, and this is no joking matter. The country has fallen too far. From reputed criminals accompanying P&M ministers to the President's house, to more recently, the arrest of a P&M candidate for allegations of criminal activities. This government continues to be seen as facilitating criminal activity by its policies and actions. The repeated amnesties offered by the Minister of Finance for lawbreakers, businesses who have deprived our country by refusing to pay billions owed in VAT and NIB contributions required by law, sends a message of this government's total lack of respect for the rule of law. That is a crime. The failure of the P&M government to fully equip the pre-deal larceny squad for the last 8 years with adequate vehicles, personnel, and equipment, including firearms, to allow them a fighting chance against criminals who are brutalizing and bankrupting farmers, emboldens the criminal element. That is a crime. The refusal of the agencies to effectively tackle noise pollution so that clubs and bars operating in Valsane, in Chaguanas, in Davie, and throughout Trinidad and Tobago facilitates the breaking of the law. That is a crime. The failure to provide adequate social support in schools and the unwillingness of either the Minister of Education 1 or the Minister of Education 2, either senior or junior, to take a firm stance against the burgeoning violence in schools leaves students, parents, and teachers living in fear. That is a crime. The refusal of the Minister of Finance to be transparent and to ensure an equitable distribution of foreign exchange has generated a substantial and open black market in foreign exchange. That is a crime. The government is owing billions to businesses in VAT refunds and outstanding payments for goods and services provided to date, illegally hijacking and withholding the people's money for months and years, suffering investment in this country. That is a crime. We have now become accustomed to seeing illegal playway operators in bars and groceries openly advertising their illegal conduct, and nothing is being done about it. That is a crime. There are multiple reports of small businesses that are being extorted by criminals in an extortion racket, reportedly including rogue police officers. Nothing is being done about it. That is a crime. Rowley and his government, his band, continue to turn a blind eye to the total breakdown of the rule of law in this country. When we have porous borders that facilitated illegal entry of tens of thousands of persons into this country, as well as arms, drugs, and contraband items, and this is being facilitated by government inaction for the last 8.5 years, then clearly government's demonstrated policy is to support the illegality by their inaction. When the Minister of National Security and the Commissioner of Police prefers to spend millions of dollars in manpower and legal fees to prosecute legal firearm holders, rather than use that same manpower to pursue the rapid, dramatic rise in illegal firearms flooding this country, it signals to the criminal what and where this government's priorities are. When we can have a citizen of this country being kidnapped in foreign locations, ladies and gentlemen, and dragged back to Trinidad and Tobago with the permission of a senior government official, and nothing has been done about it, that is a crime. That is a crime, and it shows what the government's priorities are. Rowley and team's anti-crime plan is a deny and do nothing approach. For example, one of the major sources of foreign exchange in this country is Carnival, largely because it's one of the few times that small and micro owners of business can generate some income, including foreign exchange. It's not just fete promoters and mass camp owners that are involved in this national event. The wood carver, the clay artists, small-scale painters, macrame producers, the local ice cream makers, snow cone vendors, nutsmen, bakers, sugar cake and fudge makers, pan men, are all foreign exchange earners at this time. So when massmen and others are concerned about falling sales and are telling this government what businesses and citizens have been telling this government for the last 8.5 years, that crime is severely affecting their business, they expect a listening ear and a commitment to do something about it. Instead, we have a minister saying that massmen are somehow misleading this country, that they are liars in effect, that they're misleading the country when they are saying that the crime is affecting their business. And he is calling on the massmen to bring evidence. And that, ladies and gentlemen, right there is where the problem is. The government refuses to accept that there's a problem and therefore refuses to do anything about crime. There is no hope on the horizon as long as these people are in office. The decision makers, in fact, prefer to attack those who speak about the problem rather than to treat with the problem. We already know that the US and Canada and other international agencies and countries have issued travel advisories warning their population not to come to Trinidad and Tobago because of the high crime rate. You know, I don't often agree with the comments of Professor Selwyn Kudzu. But 1 week ago, I think he hit the proverbial nail on the head. I think he hit the nail on the head when he said, and I quote, "Keith Rowley and his government will not solve your growing crime problem for the simple reason that Rowley has become part of the problem rather than part of the solution." The quotation continues. "He is much too arrogant, indecisive, ill-disciplined, and uninspirational to lead such a valiant, vital national effort." And while Rowley and the PNM regime has refused to act in the national interest, the opposition UNC has repeatedly demonstrated over time our patriotism during these desperate times. UNC political leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar has led a team who have openly provided a multiplicity of recommendations for dealing with the criminal scourge, this criminal tsunami facing our citizens. We have not waited for an election to be declared or for a meeting to make generalized statements about crime fighting. We have engaged consultants and the public and have consistently provided well-researched, specific, short, medium and long-term initiatives, which have worked in the past and which can work again if only this government will take the effort and the time to do something. Instead, the PNM's response has been to criticize and condemn without having implemented a single new initiative that has worked. In contrast, in direct contrast, the Kamala Prasad-Bisasa administration was able to reduce the crime rate by adopting a national plan, including programs in all ministries designed to create employment, develop business confidence, improve the ease of doing business, develop educational pathways and opportunities, provide infrastructure so that the vast areas of rural Trinidad and Tobago can be included in the economic pie, stimulate new industries and develop existing businesses, etc. There were targeted social programs for those most in need, including the poor and the differently abled. Healthcare was boosted to facilitate a healthier human resource core. You see, it's not just about the police service and more personnel. That is important, but not enough. What is needed is a political will. And since 2015, this country has been in a negative trajectory, speeding downhill while Rowley, Young, and Imbert sit like three blind mice, oblivious and uncaring as our citizens suffer. Energy booms have come and gone. Billions of unexpected revenues have been received and spent, yet today, the country under the PNM is significantly worse off. In September 2015, this country had 620,000 persons with jobs, contributing to a growing economy. Today, that figure is 584,200. Despite this PNM regime having spent $450 billion, 34,800 persons employed in 2015 are now without a job. This has placed severe hardships on the National Insurance Board, which is now in a deepening financial crisis, putting at risk the pensions of persons who have been working in this country for decades. Over the same period, 2015 to present, 600 farmers and farm workers left the agricultural sector because of government's policy. 18,300 persons involved in construction lost their jobs. 6,400 persons engaged in the manufacturing sector lost their jobs. 11,500 persons employed in the petroleum sector and the gas sector found their jobs taken away from them by this incompetent government. 7,400 men and women engaged in transport, storage, and communications are no longer employed in the sector because of this government's policies and programs. Ironically, these are the very sectors needed to bolster the economy, to promote the economy to grow. Citizens are being made to pay the brunt of this government's inaction in their pockets and with their lives. You see, when farmers stop producing because of predial lasting and this government's absolute lethargy in the agricultural sector, we have to import food, eating up our foreign exchange reserves, which are at the worst stage it has been for over a decade and a half. Ironically, conglomerates are now replacing farmers, not as farmers, but as food importers. This increases the cost of food to citizens. Groceries, parlors, and small businesses are forced to pay for private security, install cameras, alarms, additional security, lighting, burglar proofing, etc. All of these are costs that are passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices. In every form and in every fashion, citizens are being made to pay for this government's complete mishandling of crime, either in blood or in money, and neither is acceptable. Ladies and gentlemen, successful UNC governments have had significant strides in bringing crime down. So we are fully aware of what a successful formula for anti-crime is. We are fully aware of what is needed to treat with crime, to bring crime down. We are fully aware of what the successful formula is because we have tried it and done it. It is not just about having the right plans, policy, and legislation. You must have the right leadership. Patriotic individuals who possess the political will to implement those initiatives. That is what is needed right now. The right plans, policies, laws, leadership, and motivation. And if you lack one or the other, you will fail. And when this government fails, the country suffers as a result. Citizens suffer as a result in blood, sweat, and tears. And that is something neither the opposition nor foreign allies can help this government with. We could give the Prime Minister all of the crime plans and strategies in the world. We could support every single bill they bring to Parliament, but as long as the PNM lacks the will to effectively crack down on the criminals who are terrorizing this nation, as long as they reject their responsibility to keep the people of this nation safe, as long as they continue to place impotent leadership at the helm of national security, they will continue to fail and citizens will continue to suffer. The power and responsibility to resolve all of these deficiencies lies squarely with the Prime Minister and his Minister of National Security and his Minister of Finance. But I am not convinced that any of them are willing or even capable of doing what is significantly required and desperately needed to defend this nation. We have been waiting for almost 9 years for this government to deal with crime. And they have failed repeatedly, and we've gotten to the point where foreign crime syndicates want to invade our neighborhoods. You know, it's not just foreign criminals that like Trinidad and Tobago under the PNM. Local criminals like them too, because they know that under the PNM they will not be caught, they will not be punished, they will not be held to account for their actions. So we are done with waiting with the PNM. We in the opposition will continue to do our duty. We will continue to provide a platform where academics, law enforcement professionals, stakeholders, and citizens can come together to discuss the issues and the design of solutions to this crime problem. And ladies and gentlemen, I end based on something I said in the middle of my presentation, that there are three persons who preside over the entire protection of Trinidad and Tobago: the Commissioner of Police, the Minister of National Security, and the Prime Minister, who is the head of the National Service, the National Security Council. Today I want to add the Police Service Commission, because they are responsible for the selection of the Commissioner of Police. Today I want to call for the shameful resignation of the Minister of National Security, of the Minister of, well, the Prime Minister, of the Police Service Commission, and, ladies and gentlemen, the Commissioner of Police. They have all failed. And the fact that they continue in office simply means that this government continues to endorse and support the rise of criminal activity in this country, and we cannot accept that. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I now turn over to my colleague, Dr. Roodal Moonilal, who will treat with some of the other issues relating to the criminal sector. Thank you.
Great, well done.
Thank you.
You want to just take this? Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Dave Tancoo, Member of Parliament for the constituency of Oropouche West and Chairman of the United National Congress, for the very comprehensive analysis of crime and economy that continues to plague Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning to all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, members of the press, well-wishers, followers of this social media broadcast in the region and indeed in North America, Europe, and the Caribbean. It is again our pleasure to speak to you from the headquarters of the United National Congress in Chaguanas, Trinidad, and speak on several issues. And this morning we are addressing the very serious crisis we face in terms of crime, security, law, and order. It is absolutely clear to anyone and everyone that Trinidad and Tobago is now in a crisis of lawlessness, a crisis of insecurity. A former member of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, now an international civil servant and diplomat, a Calypsonian as well, Mr. Wayne Hade, made a startling revelation recently. While domiciled somewhere in another part of the world, in a distant corner of the world, indicated that he himself is scared to return to Trinidad and Tobago, the place of his birth, and he feels safer in countries which he identified as war-torn countries. Now that's a fascinating conclusion, fascinating revelation by Watchman, who I know, of course, personally, many years, being a colleague at the University of the West Indies and in the Students' Guild in particular. This morning, I wanted to speak on crime, criminality, and so on, but to, of course, take the issue that we are dealing with and make some introductory remarks on this issue. Dr. Rowley, as Mr. Tancoo indicated, now back from a fresh trip to Washington. Dr. Rowley led what was really, in this carnival time, he led a band of players to Washington, some of whom had on their costumes as well, sat at the table. He discussed crime and security with the CIA, the FBI, the Congress, the ABC, the XYZ. He will discuss this with everybody in every part of the world. Members of the press will recall that Dr. Rowley went to Canada and asked the Canadian government to help. He went to CARICOM and asked CARICOM to help. He has now gone to the United States and asked the United States to help, but he cannot meet the opposition in Port of Spain and ask the United National Congress to help. And that's the problem we face. Dr. Rowley will not go into Laventille, Point Fortin, Arima, San Fernando, Chaguanas, Cuba, Pinal, and consult the people, as the opposition leader, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, is doing now on the back of two very successful crime consultations, one in St. Joseph and recently a mammoth turnout in San Fernando, where members of the public gave their opinion, their suggestions, their recommendations, their solutions to dealing with crime. And we had, of course, presenters, expert presenters in various fields related to crime and insecurity. In my own constituency, two young persons, business persons, up in the morning at the, at pre-dawn hours, preparing to go out to sell doubles, they were attacked in the most vicious manner in a home invasion where they were beaten and shot at, and their children exposed to this level of brutality in the society. This is a heartless country that Keith Rowley presides over. Keith Rowley himself, I put it to you, lack a heart. He is heartless. He travels all over the world, and this is a classic one. Every leader in this country, prime minister and cabinet, even cabinet members too, over the years, the population often make critical remarks about their travel. Because as all of us know, we have served in government, it's a lot of money when leaders and their delegations travel. Keith Rowley, knowing that we will attack him on all of this travel around the world, he is like Marco Polo now. As soon as he comes back, he tells us of the next trip. He is not staying here to face the fire, to meet the people, to walk the ground. This heartless government has no care for people. And he says now, well, our policy is to meet the head, to go to the top all over the world and meet corporations and government. But that has brought no results. Absolutely no tangible results have come to this country. Has crime been on the decrease because of all these trips that you took all over the world? Went to Australia to buy boat, went to Holland, went to Germany, went to London, all over America, all over the Latin American, South American countries. We have seen no result. But Rowley defends that and legitimizes that to say, oh, we have to go to the top. We have to go in the boardrooms where power is residing there and decisions are made. But nothing has resulted in a better quality of life for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And certainly not for the doubles vendors. Rowley lives in a binary world, where in his world, it is one or the other. I have done no wrong and the UNC is to blame. That is his world. It's a binary world that he lives in. He blames everybody except himself. And the government lacks a soul, lacks a heart. Today, young people of this country are fleeing in droves to North America and elsewhere for jobs. This government has not created jobs. Our young people with education. Quite recently, yesterday, day before, I find myself approaching people, business persons and so on, to assist young people who have university qualifications, are unemployed. Young people in the society with education, with training, have no hope because of this government in office. And today we must take a stand that we intend, at the return of the United National Congress, we intend to implement strategies to create jobs for the youth of Trinidad and Tobago so they may stay here. Our human capital may stay here and develop their own country rather than another country. So coming back with his band from Washington, he had no hope to give people in his press conference. Instead, he said, hold on, don't ask me nothing about national security. I'll talk about that Tuesday. In the height of Carnival, when this country will go into a phase where everybody is concerned with Mukojambi, Extempo, the Marsh Gras, Mass, Carnival, Hayat Fete coming up and so on, he wanted to talk about national security in that situation. As if the murderers will take a rest, the bandits will take a rest. While he was doing that, TV6 had a report a couple nights ago, 24 robberies in 24 hours. This press conference will last for 2 hours or a bit more. That means during this press conference, there would be 2 robberies somewhere. 24 hours, 24 robberies. TV6 headline in the news a couple nights ago. This is the situation we face in this country. And we have no hope from the government. We have no hope from a sleeping Fitzgerald Hines. I want to remind persons, a few days ago, we had a very, very important, critical Joint Select Committee meeting involving members of the press, and an interview by the Commissioner of Police and her team, who came to the Red House, of course, to be questioned by members of the Joint Select Committee on national security. Now, I don't want to get into that, but to just remind you that the newspapers and the editorials went to task with this Commissioner of Police. Clearly, the Commissioner of Police is out of her depth. Clearly, the Commissioner of Police really lacks the wherewithal, the competence and capability and so on, even the communication skills and so on. And I think the country knows this. This is not something that we are saying that is personal to the Commissioner of Police. So this morning I want to inform the national community. Listen, this is not about whether the Commissioner, I saw a headline in the newspaper, don't blame Erla. And the newspaper of today, I believe, is the Guardian, Sunday Guardian. Erla not the worst. Well, I want to tell you something. If Erla is not the worst, and it had worse and so on, that is a matter for writing books on crime and books on criminality and so on. That's not a matter for us today. Who was the worst and who was the best? The fact is, 24 robberies in 24 hours. The doublesman and his wife were attacking a home invasion. Bandits regularly rob businesses around this place, around Trinidad and Tobago. Crime, burglaries, break-in, robberies, serious crimes. They are on the rise. And I took note at page 7 of The Guardian that while they were arguing that this is not the worst, they appear to suggest that the worst commissioner was a gentleman by the name of James Filbert. I don't know about this data, but if that is so, this is James Filbert, who they appear to portray here as one of the worst commissioners in the first year of office, who is the deputy chairman of the Airports Authority, appointed by Keith Rowley and his cabinet. This is a very serious matter because the Airports Authority and the airport is a place where security is of paramount importance, given international crime, transnational crime. We are hearing about now terrorism. As MP Tancoo said, the only thing this government have been able to attract is not foreign direct investment, it's transnational organized crime. That is the only thing the PNM attracts. They don't attract investment in factories, in business, in banking industry and services and so on. Coming back to this matter of I just want to repeat something and get clarity on something for members of the press. When the commissioner was asked of the 11 targeted areas the commissioner had indicated to the parliament before, 11 targets for 2023, the commissioner admitted that not one single of 11 targets were met. But what may have passed you is what the commissioner indicated in some of these targets. In terms of reduction of homicides, 20% they targeted, they had a 5% reduction. In terms of reduction in serious crimes, 15% targeted, 2%. Increase in firearms seized, now 1%. I don't know if 1% is half of a gun, is a bullet, because when you say 1% of something, you don't know what is the total figure and what that means. They have had 5% decrease in fatal accidents targeted. It was 1%. There was no meeting, even in a positive manner, on arresting priority offenders, on larceny of motor vehicles, which is a critical matter related to crime. On persons charged under the Anti-Gang Act, there was not even a 1% in terms of reaching that target. In terms of violent crime, 30% detection rate for violent crime, that was their target to reduce. That was not even reduced by 1%. Reduction in violent crimes, reduction in detection rate, no, not even 1% to meet the target. So that these targets came, these targets go, but we are hearing the apologists now telling us that Ms. Christopher is not the worst. I could imagine what is the worst. This morning I want to place a focus on something called the Police Service Commission. The Police Service Commission is the one that meets and undertakes what we ought to believe is a rigorous, strenuous process to arrive at a nominee that goes to the President, then the Parliament, and the Parliament goes to decide on Commissioner of Police, Deputy Commissioners, and so on and so forth. Now, what is startling is that when a commissioner arrived at Parliament a couple of years ago by the name of Mr. Dolarchan, I believe, Devda Dolarchan, there was an international organization called KPMG, International Accounting Firm, that participated in that process and arrived at that nominee. The PNM butchered that nomination. They butchered it to the extent that they cast aspersions on the work conducted by an international accounting firm, KPMG, and that was the subject of a joint select committee investigation into how they could arrive at Mr. Dolarchan. And they butchered, they savagely beat KPMG and the Police Service Commission for not following process and so on, because they arrived at that nominee, who was the number one nominee with 90%. Incidentally, it was then reversed. The Parliament did not favor that nominee. Today, I am calling on the government and I am calling on the Joint Select Committee of Parliament on National Security to undertake an immediate investigation, interrogation, examination of the Police Service Commission and the nomination of Earl Christopher to be Commissioner of Police. When we went to Parliament, the Prime Minister said we must accept the Police Service Commission nominee. They had no international help. They changed the law to remove an external consultant. So that today, there are people at the Police Service Commission, and I want to call their names. And if possible, we can get their picture up on our screen as well, because these are the invisible people. These are the people who you don't hear about too much. These are the people who make decisions, but they somehow hide. And I call their name today. Retired Justice of Appeal Judith Jones, Attorney at Law, retired Justice. Miss Maxine Atong, and I'll say more about her. In a moment, I'll say more. Miss Maxine Atong, Mr. Ian Kevin Ramdani, Miss Maxine King, there are two Maxines, I believe, and Mr. Rajiv Prasad. Could I indicate to you that these are members of the Police Service Commission? They are the ones who selected Earl Christopher. She did not select herself. Earl Christopher came 12th in 2019-2020 in a scheme, in an assessment in which Mr. Gary Griffith, I believe, came first. But I wanted to indicate and to raise the point here that of these nominees, Mr. Rajiv Prasad is an attorney at law, of course, a recently senior counsel. Mr. Ramdani is experienced in sociology and works at the Caribbean Safety Institute. Ms. Maxine Atong, I believe it is stated, is a management expert. Ms. King is a finance and management expert. And one or the other of them is an expert on speeches or therapy with speech or teaching people to talk and so on. Not one member of the Police Service Commission has experience in law enforcement or in national security. Not one. They brought this to Parliament, and I want to remind you, members of the press, it was Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa in November 2021 who raised concerns about Maxine Atong, Maxine King, and others who had direct connection to the Prime Minister and that infamous Inez Gate development in Tobago, which was built by his friend, Mr. Alan Warner. And it was indeed a member of the Police Service Commission with a direct contact to Inez Gate, who was appointed. And in November 2021, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa raised a concern in the Trinidad Express newspaper at that time on this appointment, and said that it was not only, incidentally, that person. It was not only that person, and I'm reading from the Express newspaper, November 13, 2021, an article titled Moonilal Questions PM on Friend Involved in Airport Project, in which we raised serious concerns about the appointment of members to the Police Service Commission. And it was in that context we raised the point that one of the nominees that came forward to that commission, I believe it is Maxine King. I wanted to be careful when I raised this issue. Maxine King had a link to Inez Gate. And Mrs. Prasad Bisesa noted that King was a wealth manager at First Line Securities, and that First Line Securities was the collateral agent in developing the Bacolod Estate in Tobago, linked to Alan Warner. No problem with Alan. If it was Alan, was a problem. Linked to Alan Warner, the business partner and friend of Keith Rowley, so that we had concerns that Ms. King was appointed a member of the Police Service Commission. We have Maxine Atong as well, appointed, and others, not one with experience in national security. The Police Service Commission must be hauled before a Joint Select Committee on National Security to bring their report card, bring their assessment forms, and let us go through to see what was the result of the interview. What was the result of all the processes? Who ranked first, second, third, that they arrive at Erla Christopher? Erla Christopher didn't take a taxi and go to the commissioner office, you know. She was put there by the Police Service Commission making that recommendation. That is how she was put there. And the Police Service Commission must be hauled before a JSC on national security to explain, because we are informed that in an area called interview, the mark was 50. That two members of the Police Service Commission gave Erla Christopher 49 marks and 50 marks out of 50 respectively, that toppled her to the top. We are asking, who are those commissioners? How could they have given her that mark, which clearly sent her to the top, to make her the #1 candidate ahead of a person by the name of MacDonald Jacob, incidentally, who I must tell you came second, so that the JSC need to interrogate the Police Service Commission immediately on their process, on their interview results, on other stages that they went through to arrive at how Erla Christopher was nominated. I leave that there, but to indicate to you that commissioners like a Police Service Commission must no longer hide behind the curtain and do what they want. A former commissioner, Police Service Commission, sent a nomination to the President House. The Prime Minister admitted he intercepted it, throw it in the dustbin, so that Gary Griffith will no longer continue as Commissioner of Police. I leave that there for now. We will speak in the coming days more on this matter. The state of crime, we are all aware of what is happening. I repeat, this matter of home invasion, that the political leader, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, has spoken on this matter passionately, emotionally, and in a policy-oriented manner, where we have indicated the UNC's policy of stand your ground. It is the intention of an incoming UNC government to ensure that home invasion is made a specific offense that will inculcate, of course, other related offenses, and be treated as a very serious offense, akin to kidnapping with ransom, with a heavy jail term, so that it will deter persons from coming into the sanctity of your home, beating your wife and children, shooting the breadwinner in the family, holding you hostage in your own home, and all the traumatic experiences that flow from that. That must stop now. And I assure you that a UNC government will deal with crime, will deal with law and order within 6 months of returning to office. We are clear. We have the strategies. We have been speaking on this for years now. whether it is the emergency E999, whether it is the Joint Army Police, whether it is the Community Comfort Patrol, whether it is using technology, and of course providing those who qualified with firearms so they can defend themselves and their family and their property. We will provide firearms to persons who qualify and ensure they can defend themselves. No bandit want to go into a home and when he opens the front door to rob somebody, he's faced with a homeowner with something pointing in the middle of his forehead. No bandit want that. And that is where we have to go if we are to discourage and deter this vicious and heinous home invasion attacks that we are witnessing. Before I come to one of the most important issues I'll raise today, I just wanted to make a reference in passing to the matter involving the Attorney General. Now, the Attorney General, you know an election is in the air when the Attorney General and the Prime Minister start to talk about EMBDC and live sport. 9 years, I believe, after leaving office, not one policeman has interviewed myself, certainly, I can't talk for other people, on any matter dealing with the EMBDC. Or any matter. In fact, I want to tell you, the police interview me twice in this country, and international police interview me in Miami once. All the interviews had to do with the conduct of Keith Rowley as Prime Minister. Imagine the police in the United States called me for an interview to discuss Keith Rowley. In Trinidad, police came to see me once to discuss fake oil matters, AV drilling, and so on. I can tell you that. Not once EMBDC, not once. The Attorney General beating his chest recently when contractors went to the Court of Appeal on a procedural matter involving the case filed by the PNM. And let me make that point that people don't understand. The cases in the court with EMBDC, that was filed by the PNM. It was not filed by police. PNM filed case, not police, not DPP. So the PNM put a case in court, and the contractors, some not all, made certain procedural appeals. That matter is ongoing. It may go to the Privy Council. It hasn't ended. The Attorney General beating his chest and saying they all have to go and file their defense now and face trial and so on. But it is the right of a defendant to make appeals on procedural matter if they believe that something is wrong with the case filed. And it impair their ability to file a proper defense because there is no disclosure on certain matters. That is their right. The Attorney General sounding like if he wins something. I want to remind Reginald Amor that when he was caught lying in a Miami court, he took taxpayers' money to appeal that, which he then lost. So when he was caught lying, he knew the importance of appeal. He appealed that, used taxpayers' money from Trinidad and Tobago, and then they threw out the case in Miami because he lost the appeal. So Mr. Amor, more than anybody else, should know the importance of appeal, because when you were caught lying, you went to appeal that and lost. I leave that there for now. I'll say more about that. But members of the press, the real meat of the matter I wanted to raise to you today was a very serious revelation that came to us within the last few hours. And I have something in my hand, a document in my hand. And I will begin by making a statement that when the day comes, when we depend on Venezuela for accountability and transparency, we reach. Let me repeat that. When we in Trinidad and Tobago have to depend on Venezuela for accountability and transparency, we reach. Our democracy itself has collapsed. Our institutions, public institutions, have collapsed when we depend on Venezuela for accountability. This is a country, quite recently, is facing re-sanction. They are going to be re-sanctioned because they have upheld a ban on Maria Machado, the leading presidential candidate in the Venezuelan election from the opposition, has been banned from contesting. Ms. Machado, Maria Machado, I believe is her name. And this is a country that does that. But now we have to depend on them for accountability. In a publication, and I have it in my hand, the official gazette of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, dated Monday, 29th January 2024, Caracas. I have it in my hand. This is the official gazette of the Venezuelan government, in which they have published the agreement between the government of Venezuela and the government of Trinidad and Tobago, over the Dragon deal. When Stuart Young and Rowley say this thing is secret, we can't tell you, we cannot disclose. I have in my hand this document of about 35 pages, which is the deal. This is the Dragon deal that Stuart Young and Keith Rowley refused to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago. As Mr. Tancoo said, this has all the ingredients. Do you remember, members of the press, the scandals involving sandals? Where in Barbados, they had to tell us what's happening in Trinidad. Well, in Caracas, we need to find out what's happening in Maracas. We need to know what is happening in Trinidad from Venezuela. This is where we reach. And this is not the only matter that disturbs us this morning. In this matter, the Ministry of the People Power of Petroleum is stating, and I quote, resolution by which for strategic reasons specific to the gaseous hydrocarbon field, the license for exploration and exploitation of non-associated gaseous hydrocarbons of the Dragon field belonging to the Mariscal Sucre area is granted directly and indivisible with a prior authorization from the Council of Ministers to the companies. Here the company the license is granted to. NGC Exploration and Production Limited, a company duly incorporated under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago and registered in Point Lisas, Trinidad and Tobago. And Shell Venezuela, they are making a deal with a company called NGC Exploration and Production. No one in Trinidad and Tobago know of a company named NGC Exploration and Production. NGC is a company in this country that exists, if you look at their website, for the business of distributing, marketing, selling gas. They are a middleman, so to speak. They take gas from a producer and they market it, they distribute, they transport, of course, and they sell. That is NGC. NGC is not a production and exploration company. Where does this company come from? Why have they been keeping it a secret? Why we must ask Venezuela for their gazette? Why? Why the dishonesty? Why the lack of disclosure? Why the lack of accountability? That Stuart Young cannot tell us that a company is registered that we don't know about. The people of Trinidad and Tobago never heard of this company. Heritage Petroleum on its website said that their role is the production, exploration of oil and gas. Traditionally, Petrotrin, with all the various arms of Petrotrin, would deal with what is called the gas production exploration. NGC is a middleman seller. They go to the market, they bring the product. When you produce, they take it to the market and sell and make a profit. That's how it's done. NGC is not equipped. NGC doesn't have the human resource capacity, the technical capability, the very serious scientific capacities and so on, to be involved in exploration and production of gas. They are sellers, by and large. Today, we are told of a ghost company, it may not be ghost, but we never hear about it, called NGC Exploration and Production. I will come back to this agreement now. But what is amazing is that those of us in the UNC, and I keep telling the National Committee, we don't talk without paper. We don't talk without paper. And I think before I say this one, I need to have a sip. I need my voice well moist for this one. When we checked at the company records in Trinidad and Tobago, what did we find? Now, we had to look for this because Stuart Young will not tell us. They will not tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago. November 9th, 2023, that is just a couple months ago, Register General Department, Articles of Incorporation, a company named NGC Exploration and Production Limited. In November, registering a company. We have the Articles of Incorporation. Certificate of Incorporation, never told us anything. Notice of address, change of address and so on. The person giving the information is one Venetia Adele Painter, I think. The directors of the company, Joseph Khan, a project management practitioner, don't know who is that. Mark Lokwan, chemical engineer. They have his address, something I won't call that. Mark Lokwan and Joseph Khan are directors of a company registered in 9th of November 2023. They have a return of issuance or transfer of shares document dated January 5th, 2024. So they are going about in secret registering companies that the Venezuelans tell us about. We didn't hear about this. And they, of course, put the class and number of shares, amount of ordinary shares, blah, blah, blah. Those are the things that people in this area will know about. But the point I am making is we have the documents. Why did they hide it? Why did they hide it? We got it. The other matter I raise in passing, because the members of the press and national community will have a field day with this one, I'm sure. Article 20 of the agreement states that on condition, there's a condition that not now, but when they go and they find their gas, they have, of course, a scientific process. Before they do anything, before anything is done, members of the press, there is a condition for the payment of a bonus. Article 20. And I will bring it up and read it properly, because these are matters you can't misquote and so on. And so, yeah. Article 20 states, Article 20, discovery of oil condensate associated with natural gas and so on, and unassociated natural gas. The licensees must immediately inform the ministry. Well, we're clear on that. They have 180 days to inform and make an offer for its evaluation and exploitation. So then you make an offer for exploitation and taking it out, pricing and so on. But here it is. The offer must consist of a bonus payable as an initial bonus in United States dollars or its equivalent in a currency defined by the body with jurisdiction. You have 90 days following the date of obtaining all the necessary authorization. You have to pay a bonus to the government of Venezuela according to this before you move on anything. We are being told that the bonus, called a signature fee, is 65 million United States dollars. Who is paying 65 million United States dollars to Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela before you move a cubic feet, meter, whatever, before you move gas from any site to Atlantic LNG or to Point Lisas, as the case may be? Before you move that gas, you have to pay a signature fee, or what they call in the agreement, a bonus you have to pay, which we are told is 65 million United States dollars. Where is that coming from? But this government had 2 bites of a cherry recently. I want to remind you, on November 28, 2023, there was a major debate in the Senate on a private motion filed by Senator Wade Mark, calling on the government to make 3 months reports on all matters relating to Dragonfield, calling on the government for accountability, disclosure on the agreement signed with Venezuela over the Dragonfield. That matter was debated on the 28th of November 2023. Wade Mark spoke for 45 minutes. Do you know on that day Stuart Young spoke for 40 minutes? I have his speech right here. We read his speech. Not once on the 28th of November, Stuart Young mentions a company registered on the 9th of November. Not once. So it was their intention to keep it a secret on how they are progressing. Mark Locan, we believe, is leaving NGC. Is he leaving NGC to become executive chairman of this new company? That is the question we are asking. Then, as if the 28th of November wasn't enough, would you believe, on the 23rd of January, a few days ago, there was a continuation, kept it a secret. That is their modus operandi. Don't tell people anything. When they find out, you'll defend. So they'll issue press release tonight. That's what they'll do now. They'll issue a press release by midnight tonight. They had it on the 23rd of January. Their spokesman spoke in the Senate, did not once mention this company, did not mention this agreement, did not mention the bonus upon finding gas. Did not mention that. Did not mention anything about when Shell will actually sign on to this. They did not mention it. Then they voted on the motion. It was 15-15, I believe. And the Senate president, appointed by the PNM government, said he had to vote for the status quo. So the status quo was no accountability. So he voted no accountability too. That is where we reach. And that is a very serious matter, engaging the attention of all today. And I'm hoping that this document, it is in English, there's a Spanish version obviously, but we were happy to get the English version. Official Gazette of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, dated 29th January 2024, in which it gives in detail all the articles, up to 76, I believe, 76 articles in this agreement, and involving dispute resolution and a host of other things that those people who draft up these things can understand. So I put it to you that the government has been caught. They have been caught with their proverbial pants down on the Dragonfield matter, and it is an ugly sight indeed that they have been caught this way. And again, it is the UNC. I remind people, it was the UNC in Parliament that first got the report on the report on contractors in London, where they lost an arbitration for $1 billion. It was the UNC that raised the mosquito crack matter. The government didn't tell us about that. $65 million going down the drain. Many other matters the UNC raised in Parliament and outside. And this morning, we put it to you that they have been caught. Because you cannot tell me that on the 28th of November 2023, on the 23rd of January 2024, in Parliament of all places where you enjoy privilege, you couldn't come clean with the population and tell us about this secret company that you registered to conduct business in Venezuela. This company, which is also owned by Trinidad and Tobago. So the people of Trinidad and Tobago don't even know about a company that is owned by the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I leave that there for now. I just want one or two other matters before I wind up. I'm also looking at the time. On another occasion, we will speak in more detail about matters involving works and transport. But this morning, I just wanted to repeat and add to something. We have raised this matter of UDCOT being a rogue company in Trinidad and Tobago. UDCOT is mismanaging the Port of Spain Central Block. Do you know the final cost for the Port of Spain Central Block, which is one block in a hospital, will be more than the Children's Hospital in Cuba? More. UDCOT built Skinner Park in San Fernando, rebuilt, refurbished, whatever. They cannot play an adult football match there. Because I said before, if you go to take a corner in Skinner Park, you have to run up from the toilet. They cannot play football in Skinner Park. The Brian Lara that they're boasting that they finished cannot host a test match. In fact, the Brian Lara is not the Academy of Cricket, it's the Academy of Whining. All the good fets, I believe, and the Juve fets and so on, are held at the Brian Lara. So we now have the Brian Lara in Taruba Academy of Whining. That is what they have created now. There's no Academy of Cricket. There's no international test cricket at the Brian Lara. But they will hurry to open and boast. Today I want to ask UDCOT to come clean on the next matter. A next matter. Have they given $1 billion worth of contracts to a company that has a direct link to a cabinet minister of Trinidad and Tobago? I am told that $1 billion have been given in contracts to a company with a direct link to a cabinet minister. That company is involved in several works throughout. When we were there, UDCOT was building hospital, was building fire station, police station, and so on. Do you know UDCOT is building pavement today? There's a project on Arapita Avenue to build pavement and box drain. UDCOT doing that too. Because that involved companies with links to the political executive. It involved companies that making money. And there's a scandal in UDCOT. I call for full disclosure on that Arapita refurbishment project. And why must UDCOT be involved in building pavement and box drain? There are other companies for that. But you see what happened, Kirk, is they want to socialize their teeth in. That is what they're doing. They're privatizing their profits and socializing their teeth in. So every state company, this is the last year of their government, they know it. So what is happening in this last year? They are borrowing money to teeth. So all these companies want to build box drain and pavement so they could siphon out money from the public purse as they're in the departure lounge waiting to take off. And we must search their baggage in the departure lounge as well. I am told that the secondary roads company, millions of dollars giving out in contract without any procedure. In fact, their chairman, which I'll raise on the next occasion when I have my document, their chairman had to resign in disgust because even a P&M chairman could not stomach the vomit of corruption at secondary roads, where they are fixing road and it mashing up 2 months after. That was the experience on part of the highway on this classic problem at Claxton Bay now, where 2 contractors have had to be called to do one piece of work. They had to fire a contractor because they did defective work under the, I believe it is the secondary roads. This secondary roads company needs to be investigated immediately for giving out contracts to P&M financiers who help with Balize House. And I am told when the hard-working staff at the Ministry of Works and Ministry of Local Government raise issues of shoddy work, of bad designing, and so on, of faulty claims, they are being told, please, shut up or take it to the political directorate, to the ministers and so on, because they have the protection of cabinet ministers. So the staff at the Ministry of Works and Ministry of Local Government cannot question contractors because they are saying, talk to the ministers, don't talk to us. That is where we have reached today. So brothers and sisters, there are a couple other things which on another occasion we will engage you with concerning the Airports Authority, concerning other matters and so on. But we have, I think, exceeded our time now. And I would like to end by reminding the national community that our crime consultation will continue after the carnival period. Tomorrow night, I believe, we are at Sama Barataria for our Monday night cottage meeting, which is highly anticipated, and our team will be led by the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, I believe Ms. Jerlene John, Ms. Khadija Amin, Ms. MP Saddam Hussein, and others will speak at that meeting and continue along these lines on issues critical to Trinidad and Tobago. I will end by repeating what I said earlier, that we can deal with crime, we can deal with law and order. A UNC government in 6 months, will reverse the crisis that we are seeing today as it leads to crime and insecurity. Thank you all, and I think we are available for some questions at this time.
I have some questions here from the media. This is from Alicia Boucher, TV6, directed to Dr. Moonilal. Since the UNC has called for the Police Service Commission to appear before a JSC, would the UNC be taking this flight to Parliament? And if so, how soon? Please explain the process in terms of the final decision.
Well, what I can say is that we will write the JSC chairman, Mr. Keith Scotland, a stern letter outlining the case for summoning the Police Service Commission to explain the process by which they nominated Ms. Earla Christopher. But there's a related issue I'll tell Alicia now. This very Police Service Commission has sent a notification to the Parliament to appoint 3 persons as deputy commissioners, I believe. One is, I believe, Ms. Natasha George, Mr. Wendell Lucas, and one person, the name slipped me now. So we are not in a position to accept their nominees. I cast no aspersions on Ms. George, Mr. Lucas, and the other gentleman. No aspersions at all. I'm talking about the PSC, Police Service Commission. Because if they did us that with the Commissioner of Police, what will they do with the deputy commissioners who one, Mr. Lucas or Ms. George or somebody else, will eventually act as Commissioner of Police? So they cannot be trusted in these circumstances until they account for their nominee of Ms. Earla Christopher.
And following up on that, if the JSC were to find that the process was flawed to appoint Earla Harewood Christopher, would you seek to have her removed as COP?
Well, we may not even have to seek to remove, because in May this year, I believe, which is in a couple of months, there's a issue in law. Now, this is before the court. Mr. Ram Logan, I believe, has this matter in the court. So I will just say this. She was appointed by way of extending her tenure as a police officer pursuant to the law. The cabinet did that. But in the law, they can only appoint her as a police officer after retirement for a specific period and then extend. They did that, and the extension is due, I believe, in May. Now, whether that is legal or not, Mr. Ram Logan, senior counsel, and his team will deal with that. What I'm giving is just the fact of it. And the fact is, in May, the cabinet needs to take a decision on whether Ms. Christopher continues as a police officer, which allows her to continue as Commissioner of Police. That was a matter I raised as well on the floor of the Parliament. And the government of the day will have an opportunity whether or not they will extend her tenure as a police officer.
This next question is for MP Tancoo. Has the government
changed its cost estimation of the $100 million for the Dragon pipeline?
Thank you for the question. We actually don't know what the cost estimation has been. And I urge the members of the media to press the Prime Minister so that he can provide the details to the national community, just like Venezuela has done for their country. They provide the details. Ask the Prime Minister for the facts, because he claims to have been intimately involved with this process from conception.
Another question for MP Moonilal, and this is also from Mr. Would the UNC be filing any questions in Parliament for the Minister of Energy to get more answers on the alleged company NGC exploration?
These are matters, of course, that are the prime focus of our Shadow Minister, Dr. David Lee, and in the Senate, Mr. Wade Mark. So I believe that both members would look at this carefully, in some detail, and in much more detail than I did, and they will file the requisite questions to the Prime Minister. I believe that this may form the basis for prime ministerial questions, because he claimed to know everything but tells you nothing. And that, what I was pointing out this morning is the deceit, the deception. They had two opportunities in the Parliament to inform the people of what they were doing, and they did not. And that is very deceptive, so that both members or other members may want to raise questions. But certainly, it deserves some type of interrogation.
And as a follow-up on that, are there penalties that can be levied against the government for secretly setting up this new NGC exploration company? And is this legal to do without informing the Parliament?
Well, it may not be the issue of legality or not, but certainly the issue of governance. This is a governance issue, a governance issue. And they have failed. They have failed terribly in terms of keeping the population on board. They did it with sandals as well. Everything is a secret for this government, everything. You discover by way of another government what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. And it is unethical, it is a breach of good governance principles for them to secretly be conducting business in this way. And they will be exposed, and we will go to the people. This is a matter that you need to take to the people, because it involves hundreds of millions of Trinidad and Tobago dollars up in the air, and in the context where they have created no jobs at all in this economy. Crime is so rampant. I think the population need to be, aware of it.
And to MP Tancoo, you mentioned the detection rate of 12% and the conviction rate of 12%. What would the UNC do to increase the detection rate and conviction rate?
Well, I think in my presentation I indicated what the flaws were, what the crises were. And those were the failure of the government to sufficiently resource the various agencies involved: the judiciary, the police service, the prison service, the coast guards, etc. I think what is critically required is a government to take a deliberate decision to find somewhere the political will to provide the resources so that these institutions that are involved in the administration of justice can, in fact, employ the relevant staff required and procure the relevant other resources and equipment to ensure that we have a situation where we have a fighting chance against the criminal element. The DNA labs that we have been begging for the longest while, increase access to the Forensic Science Center, those kinds of things have been up in the air for the longest while, but the government has refused to make any footsteps towards it. What we require now is a government that actually finds itself in a place where it has the political will to tackle crime, because the money is there, the resources are there. What is missing is a commitment from this government that they put the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago at the forefront of their decision making. And we have not seen that for 8.5 years, and unfortunately, I do not expect that to change in the future.
Two more questions for MP Moonilal. One, can you give more details about the U.S. police who asked you about Prime Minister Keith Rowley? When was this, and was this part of an international investigation or pending charges that you're aware of?
All I am willing to say at this time is that I have said it before. This is not the first time I'm saying that. I had said it on a public platform before that in Florida, about 2 years ago or so. I was approached by law enforcement officials in Florida and asked for an interview, and it concerned certain statements and certain actions taken by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, led by Keith Rowley. I've had very little follow-up from those persons, but there have been some follow-up on the matter. But I'm not involved in any way in any, as any witness or any investigation and so on. It was an interview that lasted, I believe, for about an hour and a half or so on that matter. The other question?
Yeah, finally, has the cabinet minister linked to the contractors that you mentioned been listed in the 265 recusals of cabinet ministers that the UNC received from
the answer is obviously yes. That cabinet member is listed as one of the most likely cabinet members to disappear because of recusal. He's a sort of serial recusal candidate. And I wanted to also repeat, because I also got a question from someone, that we are very serious when we say in 6 months or less we will reverse this crime crisis that we face. And we will do it because we have done it before. We will do it with strategies, organization, structure. We will do it by the use of the defense force and the police. We will do it by the use of technology. We will certainly introduce a higher level of technological capability for law enforcement. We will units in law enforcement. We will reintroduce the community comfort patrol. We will deal with the upgrading of the E999 system. We will deal with a more scientific basis to manage the TTPS patrols. In fact, I am told many people complain that they can drive up and down from Port of Spain to San Fernando, Port of Spain to Sangre Grande. They will not even see a patrol on the road. That is a scientific matter that requires the use of certain approaches. We will be working with law enforcement on that. We will, of course, engage international assistance for some of the big ticket items in the drug trade, human trafficking, terrorism, and so on. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has spoken at length about stand your ground policy, about the policy of ensuring that everyone who qualifies for a firearm has access to a legal firearm so they can defend themselves and their property. We were stunned the other day to know there are 25,000 applications, of which the commissioner seemed to be boasting that she dealt with 100 or so, of 25,000. I mean, clearly that is a crisis that we have to face. And we have to ensure that persons can defend themselves and their families in this time, because the state obviously cannot defend them. And there are a myriad of other strategies. We spoke about a national operations center. We have to return to that. We spoke about a new agency to deal with cybercrime, which is a challenge of this century. Cybercrime, as creating a national cybercrime agency to deal with that, which coordinates the fight against the criminals in white-collar criminals in that side of the world, the cybercrime world. So these are just some of the solutions we have in mind. It is not just simply putting police on the road or buying cars and so on. We have realized that even when you do that, if you do not have the political will, if you do not have the vision, the leadership. And I want to end by saying that the United National Congress, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa and her team bring something that the others cannot bring. They bring leadership. They bring drive, they bring vision, they bring hands-on capacity to manage crime on almost an hourly basis in Trinidad and Tobago. With those few words then, we would like to thank myself and Mr. Tancoo. We would like to thank you for your attention. Mr. Tancoo may say some final remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moonilal. As we close, I think we have provided sufficient evidence to you, the viewing public, the members of the media, that the crisis of crime, the crisis of security that we have in Trinidad and Tobago lays squarely at the foot and at the hands and in the head, at the direction of the government of Trinidad and Tobago and their failure to take decisions to treat with the problems. As we close today, I want to thank you for viewing, and I want to hope that the Prime Minister has promised a safe carnival. I hope that that safety and that promise extends to throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and not just to the carnival fetes and the boat rides that he is going to be attending. I hope that Trinidad and Tobago is safe and enjoys a safe carnival season not just, as I said, in the fetes and in the carnival cities, but throughout Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you all again for viewing, and I look forward to engaging you all in the future. May God bless us all.